That's good stuff, y'all. So let me ask you a question. How many of you have at least one social media account? Hands up. At least one. How many of you have at least 2 social media accounts? A few less. How about 3? A couple hands still up. 4. Okay, so no, we don't have any completely, totally, 100% addicted people in here. Listen, social media, I joke around a lot about it, but social media really is an amazing thing. When social media began, when we started seeing the invention of MySpace and then Facebook and Twitter and then Instagram and LinkedIn and all these other WhatsApp and all this stuff, and some of you are going, ooh, never heard of those. But all these different places where people can connect with each other online, it's a great thing because it kind of helped us be able to reach a place where we could keep up with each other, know what was going on, and the world helped us be able to spread news quickly. Did you know that how many of you remember back in, I guess it was around 2007, I think it was, when the passenger jet had to land in the Hudson Bay? How many of you guys remember that? Remember that? The pilot's name was Sully. Did you know that before the news even was able to break the story, before they even found out about it, they actually heard about it because of somebody's Twitter post that went viral? The news was initially broken through social media. And since then, it's become kind of a hotbed place for news reports to come out, whether they're real, fake, satire, whatever. But it's begun to replace newspapers and magazines. It's all starting to happen through social media. It's kind of a cool thing because it allows us to connect with friends and family, but also be able to keep up with the news. And if we're honest, we talked about it in the last series that we did, that we are heavily influenced and affected by what we tend to pour our time into, whether it's our family or whatever. And in social media world, the one that kind of took everybody by storm was Facebook. MySpace was a big deal, but it didn't get near the amount of people as Facebook did. Over the course of the last year, currently, right now, there are 2.4 billion monthly users on Facebook. That is ridiculous. That is more than 7 times the population of the United States that are using Facebook on at least 2 hours a day every month. It's unbelievable. As a result of that, it's kind of started taking its toll on us as a people because it's completely changed the way we communicate with each other. We've kind of lost the ability now to be able to talk to somebody face to face. Think about it. How many times have you talked to somebody through Facebook or a Facebook Messenger, but you don't talk to them face to face about the same things? You don't go as in depth, you don't talk about it as much. It's completely changed the way our culture communicates. And if we're being honest, like we said last week, it's actually killing us. It's killing our culture, it's killing our society, because now, since we don't have face-to-face conversations with people as much anymore, we don't have to deal with their upset or their sadness or their anger, their bitterness, whatever. Our filters are just gone. We say whatever we want, when we want, how we want, and we put this little phrase after the end of it and just say, I'm joking, and think that makes everything okay. But this type of communication is starting to kill us because when there's no filters, it actually causes brokenness. And we always say, well, honesty is the best policy. Well, yes, it is. It's always better to be honest, but it's also better to be honest when love is involved. And so we took a look at a couple of passages of Scripture, and one of them was in Proverbs 29:20, and it said this: do you see a man who is hasty in his words? Do you see a man who just is quick with his words, doesn't really think about it, just throws them out there? Solomon says there's more hope for a fool than for him. You see a man who's hasty, he's quick to speak, he's quick to get the words out. There's more hope for a fool than for him. Kind of hurts a little bit. Because the word they use for fool there is someone who is incapable of knowledge. That's what it means. It means someone who is incapable of knowledge. So someone who's quick with their words is worse than someone who is incapable of knowledge. You say, well, that's not a big deal. It's okay. Well, in Matthew 12:36, Jesus kind of throws something a little bit different on us. And it says, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they spoke. Every word that they spoke before they thought, they're going to give account for. That's me, that's you. This is not judgment in terms of heaven or hell. This is judgment based on the things that you did while on earth to impact people around you. You will give account for every careless word you spoke. And this flies in the face of everything that we think about in terms of our speech, because we see, well, I have the right of free speech. I can say whatever I want to. There's no repercussions for it. And social media has kind of fostered that and built it up. But the reality is this: there is a cost. There is a cost for speaking without filters. It's broken relationships. It's broken families. And in some cases, it's even broken churches. Because when we speak without thinking, we say things we would never say. Because they're not really who we are. In 2006, we mentioned Twitter earlier. Twitter kind of became the new big dog on the block. In 2006, it started rising up out of a company, and it was originally designed as a way to help people text message each other. It was never really, it didn't start off as what it is kind of used for today. We hear about people, tweeting and posting things on Twitter. It started out as another way to text message. Even still at that point in time, text messaging was still very much, if you look at an old flip phone and you see the keys on it, if you text message, if you want the letter C, you have to hit the button 3 times to get it. And it was time consuming. It took forever. And nobody, when they were sitting at work at their computer, wanted to be able to have to pull their phone out and just. So what they did was this company created a platform where they could go in and basically text message each other back and forth using a computer keyboard. And it went off, and it went major, major, major. People loved it. It took off, and it was a place where you had your contact list, people that were, quote, followers. They followed what you tweeted. They followed what you said. You followed them back. And if you said something really cool, somebody would then go in and say, hey, I like that. And then they would copy and paste it and send it out, which then became this whole thing of what's called retweeting, which is now there's a little button on Twitter. You can say retweet, boom, and it posts it and gives credit to the original author. Well, here's the thing that made Twitter so unique. Most of the changes they made like that didn't happen because the people that ran the company said, hey, we think this would be a great idea. It was driven mostly by the users. The users would start doing stuff, and then the company would go, hey, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Even the whole trend of hashtagging stuff, taking the little pound sign off the telephone and putting it, that started because users wanted a way to be able to catalog different conversations and topics. So they would create hashtags. You could click on a hashtag, and it would take you to everything that pertained to that particular conversation. It was revolutionary. It was genius. But here's what Twitter didn't really account for. When Twitter first started, they limited people to 140 characters in every post. That was special characters like numbers or exclamation points, periods, letters, and spaces. 140 characters to get out what you normally would say in a novel. And people were like, oh, this is ridiculous, it's frustrating. Well, several years later, and when I say several years later, Twitter started in 2006. In 2017, Twitter said, your prayers have been answered. We are now moving from 140 to 280. They doubled the amount of space and the amount of characters people could use to get out what they wanted to say. And honestly, I used to love the idea of Twitter. I have a Facebook account, I have a Twitter account, I have an Instagram account, I have a YouTube account. I have all these places where I can connect to people. I used to go into work and I would sit down at my desk and I would open up Twitter and I would go through the feed. I had a handful of people that were either worship leaders, songwriters, Christian musicians, pastors, whatever, that I would go and I would look and I would try to glean from the wisdom that they posted in 140 characters, which was really deep stuff in 140 characters. But I would go in and I would read it and I would look at it, and it frustrated me whenever I would try to put out what I wanted to say, because in case you haven't noticed, I'm a talker. I like to talk. I like to talk so much so, and my mom can verify this, when I was little, I
I had a babysitter. And she's laughing because she knows where I'm going with this. It was actually some friends of my mom and dad. Their names were Howie and Brenda. And my mom and dad wanted to go out, and they left me with Howie and Brenda. Well, things were great. I had a ball. I'm telling you, listen, to this day, I still remember having just a fabulous time with them because I had a captive audience. They listened to me because they were babysitting me. They had to have their focus on me. Right? My mom comes back, they come to pick me up, and they scoop me up in their arms, loving on me, and Howie and Brenda say, "It was great, but he can't come back here." She's like, "Well, but you just said he was good." "Oh, he was good. He just never shut up the whole time he was here." He talked non-stop. And if I wasn't talking, I was humming. When I was older, elementary school, we would go up to Ashtabula, Ohio, where my grandparents lived, my dad's parents. We would go up there for family reunions in the summers, and we would go to baseball games, we would go to movies, and it got to the point where it would be like, all right, we're all going to go to the movies. We'd get to the movie theater, and nobody had decided what movie they were going to see yet. They would say, what movie is Timothy going to see? Well, he's going to go see that. Okay, well, we're all going to see that one. Because they would, and if they did go to the same theater because it was a movie they wanted to see, they made sure they sat as far away from me as possible because I would through the entire movie. It is absolutely 100% true. See, you have verifiable proof from eyewitnesses. But no, and it got to the point where I didn't know I was doing it. And even now, like Raquel will say, we'll be places and everybody's ready to go, and I'll still be talking. She's like, we tried to leave like 2 hours ago, and you're still talking. And honestly, God has a sense of humor. Because he took someone who has a love of talking and called him to be a pastor and a singer. But that's not where the sense of humor comes in. The sense of humor comes into the fact that not only did he take someone with a love of talking and make them a pastor, but he also took someone who has a love of talking and gave them, and the youngest child in his home, a talker and a hummer and a singer who never knows when she's actually humming or singing or talking. And she will sit down and you'll be having a conversation in the car and she'll just pop up, and bless her heart, I love her to death. I would do anything in the world for my kids. If you've been around me for any length of time, you know that. I would go to jail for them. And we'll be talking, and Micah Ray, she'll start talking about something, and it's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Generally, if you're going to talk, you should know what you're going to talk about. You should know what you're talking about. You should be able to have a conversation and say, yes, this is true. In ministry, listen, as a father, I have a talker. In ministry, I'm around talkers. I'm around pastors, I'm around teachers, I'm around just normal, everyday people, I'm around kids, I'm around teenagers. And let's be honest, some of them, they know it all. Adults, kids, teenagers, they know it all. I had one guy one time tell me, I asked him, I said, so tell me your story. And he said, well, you know the Apache helicopter? I said, yeah, I designed it. And then I gave it to the military. Really? How old are you? Oh, I'm like 50 years old, 60 years old. So you were a kid when it was first put in use in Vietnam. People who are talkers, people who just talk nonstop, and I'm one of them. And listen, God is working on me. Listen, I talk about nothing up here that I have not already been through or that God is not currently dealing with me on. People who are talkers, they know it all. They've done it all. And they're full of it. Seriously. People who are talkers, they know it all, they've done it all, and they are full of it. Myself included. Some of you are looking at me going, yep, I've had conversations with you. But, Twitter, in all of its frustration for only giving you 140 characters, they were really brilliant to do that because they limited the amount of space that people had to put their foot in their mouths. But then they took it and they expanded it. Just like Twitter has a word count, guess what? We have a word count. We have a set amount of time that we will be here on this earth. We will not be here forever. Hebrews 9:27 says that it's appointed once for a man to die. We will not be here forever. We have a limited amount of words that we can speak over the course of our lives. Just like you have a limited number of words you can put into a Twitter post. And yes, you can string them together and put together a novel if you want to, but nobody's going to listen. Nobody's going to keep reading it all. They're going to stop at some point. We have a choice that we can make as Jesus followers, as husbands, as fathers, as children, as teenagers, as employees, as bosses. We have a choice we can make. We can either continue to ramble aimlessly, or we can do the other thing and choose our words wisely. See, Jesus called us to go into the places where we go. You know, we talked about that back around Easter. When you read the Great Commission and it says, go and make disciples, it's not going from this country to this country. It starts off as going to the places you normally go and interacting with the people you come in contact with and teaching them and making disciples. Those are the opportunities that we have to choose our words wisely, to say the things that people need to hear. And this isn't the ramblings of a talkative pastor saying, choose your words wisely. This isn't just the musings and rambling of someone that just likes to hear themselves speak. This is a biblical thing. In the book of Ecclesiastes, okay, if you have your Bible, go ahead and pull it out. Turn to the book of Ecclesiastes. Put one finger in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, and put your other finger in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, because those are the two places we're going to run to here real quick, okay? So Ecclesiastes chapter 6, Ecclesiastes chapter 10, okay? These are the writings of Solomon towards the end of his life. God's offered to give him anything he wants because he's been such a righteous man. He says, I don't want money, I don't want power, I don't want wealth, I want wisdom. And God, as a result, says, okay, great. You will now be the wisest man on the face of the planet. And so in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, he says this in verse 11. When there are many words, they increase futility. What is the advantage for mankind? Chapter 6, verse 11. When there are many words, they increase futility. What does it mean for something to be futile? Pointless. Worthless. Star Trek: The Next Generation made this word extremely popular in the minds of sci-fi geeks everywhere because there was a race called the Borg. And their whole purpose was to take over the human race and assimilate them into these robotic cyborg-type creatures. And they had this saying, resistance is futile. Meaning it does no good for you to try to resist. It's pointless. It's worthless. Nothing will happen from it. Solomon says, when there are many words, when you're just spewing at the mouth, it increases futility. It increases worthlessness. If your words are already worthless and you're throwing them out there, all it's going to do is make them more worthless. And what advantage is that for mankind? What advantage is it? How does it help? What is it going to do? And then he turns around in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, which is where I had you put your other finger. Ecclesiastes 10, starting in verse 12. So this, the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor. Words are not a bad thing. He starts with the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor. It wins this good reputation. It wins this level of good repute. It raises them up. It esteems them. He says, but the lips of a fool, the lips of a person who lacks the ability to gain intelligence, consumes him. It says the beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness. Where he starts using his many words. He's coming from a place of lack of knowledge. He's coming from a place of not thinking. He comes from this place. It says the end of his talk is evil madness. The beginning of his words is foolishness, and even the end of it is taking it even a step further and going further down the rabbit hole. This is a strange thought for us. It's a little bit goofy. And it says this, a fool multiplies. A fool multiplies words. Why? Because they want to prove to you they know it. When we talk too much, we are absolutely 100% seen as foolish. This was like a knife in the gut for me when I started reading this and started realizing it. You ever heard the saying, methinks thou dost protest too much? Someone who talks too much typically is trying to pull something over on you. Or they're trying to puff themselves up. When we run at the mouth, we look foolish in our character, in our integrity, and in our faith. We're not fooling anybody. We think we are. We don't fool anyone. We don't spread wisdom. Because the things that we needed to say happen here. And everything else comes after it. And you begin to tune out what we've been trying to say and trying to do. Think about the last time you asked somebody a question. Said, hey, what do you think about this? Did they just come out with a real quick answer? Or did they then turn around and give you a thesis? As if they were trying to persuade you they deserved a doctorate. I am one of the world's worst at this. Ask anybody that's in here on Wednesday nights with us. Someone will ask me a question, they'll say, well, what do you think? And then on and on I go. I've made my point, and I keep trying to support my point, and support my point, and support my point, and support my point, instead of letting the point be the point. And we do this over and over and over and over again. Because we don't take time to do what's recommended and what's actually spoken in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 15. Solomon is still talking about this idea of words and using our words. And not just using our words, but even using our minds. And so in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 28, Paul says, listen, the mind of the righteous person thinks before answering. The mind of the righteous person thinks. The mind of the person who is thinking the right way about life and about people and about God thinks before they open their mouth. They allow things to run through a filter and allow things to stop. And then they answer. But the mouth of the wicked blurts out evil things. Now let me explain something. This is not, we think of the word wicked and we think of someone who is up to their eyeballs in sin and up to their eyeballs in trying to pull people away from God. No. Because we're all up to our eyeballs in sin. That's just the human condition. Whether you are a Jesus follower or not, you are a sinner. And you will always make mistakes because you are not perfect. This is not what it's talking about. This is talking about just someone literally who is not a right way thinker. They're not thinking the right way. That's what this boils down to. The person who is thinking the right way about God and about people and about what they can do to bring people towards God thinks before they speak. But the mouth of the person who isn't thinking about how they can move people closer to God, or about thinking the right way about who God is, or about the people around them, that person blurts out. The word used there for blurts out is the same word as things bubbling out or flowing like a river. That's what it's talking about. Things that just kind of come out of your mouth and they just keep coming and they keep coming and they keep coming and they keep coming. I want to, and again, this is not, there's a very real life thing that happened here in the Bible, okay? If you have, again, you're going to flip to another spot in the Old Testament, the book of Job, very familiar book. We're reading this and we see these things, we go, well, that's great, but I've never seen that happen in practice. What is it? Well, it did happen. If you know the story of Job, Job was seen to be someone who was completely 100% righteous before God, did what God wanted him to do, God knew that he loved him, but God gave Satan permission to torment Job and do whatever he wanted to, basically, except to take Job's life. So Job ends up losing everything. He loses his family, he loses his kids, he loses all of his livestock, he loses pretty much all of his servants, several houses. And Job, at one point in the story, is just sitting there in mourning and grieving. He's wearing sackcloth, he's covered in dust and ash. His wife has already told him to curse God and die. And something happens that we've all experienced. He's sitting there in this grieving process, and his best friends, they show up at the doorstep. And they do something that someone who is grieving wishes everybody would do. They just come in and they sit. And they just sit. And they sit. And they sit. And they sit. Until eventually they get tired of sitting. And they decide, we're going to comfort you now, Job. And so they start talking. And every single one of them, they talk, and they talk about the goodness of God and how great God is. And then, by the time everything is said and done, they all come to the same place. Job, if this is happening, you must have done something. What did you do? What sin do you have hidden in your life? Chapters 13, 14, 15 of the book of Job. On and on and on. Just these words just pouring out of their mouth. And Job just sits there and takes it. Job chapter 16. Job finally speaks up. It says, then Job answered, I have heard many things like these. You're not telling me anything new, but I'm going to tell you something right now. You are all miserable comforters. I don't feel better about myself. You are terrible. You are the worst pat her on the backers, it's going to be okay people I've ever met in my entire life. You're horrible. And then Job says something. Is there no end to your empty words? What has provoked you that you continue testifying? It says, why are you still talking? What did I do that makes you think I still want to listen to you right now? Why in the world do you think, why are you still talking? Your words have empty, there's emptiness there. They're not making me feel better about myself. They're probably making you feel better about yourself because you're not in the situation I'm in. These guys went on in what's recorded there for verse upon verse upon verse upon verse upon verse. And Job finally says, enough is enough. Just hush. I can't listen to it anymore. Have you ever been in that place where you just want someone to just hush? Or maybe you've been the person that someone says, well, oh my gosh, I wish you would just stop talking. I've been in both of those situations. So I know how it feels when someone just goes on and on. You just can't take it. You're like, oh my goodness, you used up your word count a long time ago. In one simple phrase, Job lays out the entire bottom line for all of humanity. He does. Wasting your words helps no one. Going on and on and on helps nobody. If there's a dialogue back and forth, by all means, continue to speak truth. But once you speak truth, there's no reason to continue to go on and on and on and on. It took me several years to come to grips with the fact that it is okay for me to just say nothing. When someone is going through tragedy or they're going through something, and Raquel and I have had this conversation over and over and over again. So husbands, I need you to listen to me real careful right here. When your wife talks to you about the things that are going on in her world, that is not an invitation for you to jump in and fix it. Sometimes they want you just to listen. But when you jump in and you start talking about what they should do and how they shut down. It took me years to figure that out. Because at my core, I'm a fixer. I want to make it better. I want to fix it. But it is okay to just say nothing and just let someone get it out. Sometimes people just need to vent. It's sometimes okay when you come into a home with someone who is going through the worst days of their life to just sit there with them and say, I don't know what to say. I've learned that a lot of times people are more receptive to saying, I just don't know, than for you trying to pretend like you know all the answers. A righteous person stops and thinks before they answer. Why? Not because they don't want to talk, but because they want the words that they say to matter and to impact the people that they're speaking to. This is something that our culture has lost sight of. This is something that the church has lost sight of. Somewhere along the way, the church began to lose its influence. And in some ways, it's because people like me stand up in places like this and speak over and pound away at the same thing over and over again, when they could have easily in 15 minutes said the same thing and it been more impactful. To which the question then becomes, well then Tim, why are you standing up there for 30 minutes? It's okay, I get it. I'm not paid by the word. I'm not paid by the character. But sometimes there are messages that have to go a little bit deeper. When you're talking about something and imparting truth, truth has to be told. But sometimes truth can be told in less than a 40-minute message, less than a 45-minute message, less than a 20-minute message. Some of the most impactful messages I've ever heard in my life happened in 10 minutes. Some of the most impactful conversations I've had with people happened in a 5-minute conversation. I've seen people's lives completely spun around because someone looked at them and simply said, you know what? I love you. Not, you know what? I love you. And I love you because of this and this and this and this and this. And then, you know what? I love you because God said to do that. No, simply because of, I love you. I've seen people's day completely spun around because someone said thank you. Your words don't have to be over the top and overly abundant. They just have to be dripping with love. And probably if we will condition ourselves, and this is outside of our comfort zone, to use the fewest words possible, you will see the impact in your life change dramatically. Because it's no longer about trying to figure out how much you can say to someone to get them to see things your way. It becomes more about, I value this person enough to not waste their time or my words on what I'm about to say. I promise you, it will change everything. So why am I saying this? Because I'm a talker. It's okay to be a talker, as long as you don't use empty words. Because when you begin using empty words, you waste your words. And wasting words helps no one. So what do? First off, We have to change the way that we think about our words. Our words don't exist for us to make ourselves look good, let people see how smart we are or how together we are. Our words exist specifically for the point of communication, transference of ideas and knowledge, and to lift people up and to encourage. And if that's the point of our words, it's okay for us not to speak when the things that we need to say aren't going to accomplish one of those things. And it is okay for us in the moment when someone asks a question that we don't know the answer to, rather than wasting our words and potentially pushing them further away from Jesus, to say, let me get back to you on that. Because it would be better for us to use our words to build up the people around us and to move them closer to Jesus than to waste our words and then walk away with nothing. So here's my challenge to you. How many words a day do you waste? How many times do you walk away from a conversation and go, man, I wish I'd said that differently? How many times a day do you walk away from a conversation with your spouse going, probably could have just avoided that fight? How many times a day do you walk away from your job saying, I cannot believe I just said that? The first step towards anything is to admit that you have a problem. The first step towards any kind of change is to admit that you've got a problem. The second step is to say, I need someone to help me fix it. Because I can't fix it on my own. Paul says, don't conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but allow yourself to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The only way your mind can be renewed, the only way that the thoughts that you have and the beliefs you have about the words you speak can be changed is by allowing yourself to get closer to the one who created those words. It has to start by handing yourself over to the creator of the universe, the one who died for you. Without that happening, there is no restoration, there is no renewal, there is no transformation. It has to start there. If you are in this room and you're not a Jesus follower, let me ask you this. Why? What is it that is keeping you from taking that step? What questions do you have that you need answered? Ask them. Come to me. Ask me those questions, and I will help you find the answers to them. If you're in this room and you're a Jesus follower and you say, you know what, you're absolutely right. My words, I just waste them left and right. Then ask him to help you. Change the way that you think about how you use your words. And then let him do it. Wake up every day saying, God, today I choose to let my words be few. And then watch what happens. I don't know what decisions you need to make in your life. I don't know what decisions you need to make about Jesus or about your words or about how you view people or yourself. But I do know this. Wasting our words helps no one. Until we can decide to let our words be few, we're just making it hard on ourselves to impact the world around us. Father, thank you for creating something as unbelievable as communication, and giving us the ability and the knowledge to be able to have so many words at our disposal. Father, I do pray that today we would begin the process of allowing you to help us limit those words to words that will actually push people closer to you. Father, I pray if there's anyone in this room who has questions about you, I pray that you give them the courage to ask the questions. And for those of us that have placed our lives in your hands, I pray that you would help us to let our words be few. Help us to point people directly towards you. In Jesus' name.